Senator from Florida.
Madam President, America is in a debt crisis. But it appears for Joe Biden and my colleagues across the aisle, reckless spending has only just begun. If left unchecked, this spending will be devastating for families in my state of Florida and all across our great nation. Washington's insane spending has our federal debt rocketing toward $30 trillion. That's equal to $233,000 in debt for every American family. Think about that. America's debt crisis, caused by decades of wasteful and reckless spending by Washington politicians, has now grown to the equivalent of every American family owing $250,000 in debt. But Biden, my colleagues across the aisle want more. President Biden is pushing for trillions in wasteful spending, raising the U.S. federal debt by 60% to $39 trillion, and the debt-to-GDP ratio to 117% in 2030, the highest level ever recorded in American history. Enough is enough. It's time to end the madness. Today, I'm introducing the Federal Debt Emergency Control Act to help bring some accountability back to Washington. On July 31st, the current suspension of the federal debt ceiling is set to expire, giving Congress a choice: act responsibly to reduce federal debt through structural reform to how we approach spending, or suspend the debt ceiling again, allowing more reckless spending that will cripple our nation with insurmountable debt. Reckless spending has consequences. We're already seeing rising inflation. Let's remember, inflation doesn't hurt the rich, but it devastates our poorest families. It hurts families like mine growing up. It hurts poor families. It hurts people on fixed income. Just look around us. Milk prices are up. Bread prices are up. Gas prices are up. Meat prices are up. It seems like everything's up right now. When inflation happened in the 70s, I watched what my parents went through. At that point, my mom was taking in ironing from other families to make ends meet. At the end of the day, whatever she made that day, either my older brother and I would go to the grocery store. And when you watched, and she was worried about milk and food, all of the prices going up, she said, you only have this amount of money. And we had to know what everything cost before we went to the checkout counter. It's not fair. No family should have to go through worrying about the price of bread and milk and things going up week after week. We can get control of inflation. We can put our nation on a fiscally responsible path, but we've got to have real solutions that hold Congress accountable. My Federal Debt Emergency Control Act aims to rein in Washington's out-of-control spending with concrete checks and balances, including the declaration of a federal debt emergency anytime the debt exceeds 100% of GDP. And by the way, once debt equals 100% of GDP, it's very difficult to start paying down debt. You have to dramatically either reduce spending or dramatically grow your economy. Declaring a federal debt emergency would initiate common sense debt reduction measures, including a requirement that 2/3 of Congress vote to increase the debt before approving any bill with deficit spending. Also, terminate any unobligated funding for the American Rescue Plan Act and any previous spending bills. Send it back to the Treasury General Fund for deficit reduction to reduce our debt. Finally, would ensure that any bill reducing the federal deficit by at least 5% over 10 years is fast-tracked through the legislative process. Everyone can get behind these common sense measures. That's why my bill is already endorsed by the National Taxpayers Union, the Council for Citizens Against Government Waste, Americans for Tax Reform, Americans for Prosperity, Freedom Works, and Club for Growth. I'm also proud to have the support of Senators Cruz, Braun, Blackburn, Johnson, but also Ernst and Tuberville as co-sponsors of this important legislation. With President Biden's budget proposal, and just put that in perspective, his budget proposal is $6 trillion. This year, our federal receipts are only going to be $3.5 trillion. how can we expect to run trillion and trillion and trillion dollars of deficits year after year? With his budget proposal, we see how important the need to get government's and Washington's awful spending habits under control and start paying down our debt. I did it before. I did it as governor of Florida. I walked in with a $4 billion deficit. I started reducing taxes my first year. We reduced it every year in 8 years. And we cut over a third of the state debt. We did it by being responsible, by holding government accountable, for watching how we spent every dollar. It can be done. So getting back on track is possible, but it takes discipline, it takes accountability. It starts with taking concrete steps like rejecting bloated budgets and passing common sense legislation like the Federal Debt Emergency Control Act. We have the chance to do